Welcome back to Velshi Ruhle. Our next guest just finished participating in the NBC Gun Safety Forum, which is underway in Las Vegas. Joining us now, Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, Indiana, and Democratic presidential candidate. Mayor Pete, let's start by getting your reaction to the news about Bernie Sanders, who's now canceling events until further notice after this heart procedure.
Well, of course, wishing him and his family the best. This heart disease came to my family last year, and I know that everybody's going to be eager for him to be back in fighting shape and on the trail as soon as possible.
Mayor Pete, it's Ali here. In recent weeks, the president has suggested that Democrats some should be arrested for treason. He's compared the whistleblower and those who gave him information to being a spy. He said it again today. He said multiple times that Democrats are launching a coup to overthrow his government and suggested there could be a civil war if they're successful. And this morning he tweeted that what Democrats are doing is BS, except he didn't say BS. He used the whole word. Your thought on what's going on, because Stephanie and I are thinking about this, having covered this administration, and thinking that this feels like a shift.
Well, the simple fact is that these rantings are not the words of the leader of a democracy. When you are being criticized, let alone when you are being called out for wrongdoing, responding by describing somebody who is calling you out or disagreeing as being disloyal to the country because they're being critical of you, this is the stuff of tin pot dictatorships, not the presidency. And it's sad, not just for the president, for the presidency itself, for the country. Remember, this is the president of the United States. Your life and mine depend on the wisdom and judgment of the President of the United States. And these rants are a bad sign for all of us.
You actually have a personal experience with that, because when you say that, a lot of people, maybe even some of our viewers or viewers who watch other channels, will say, this is just Trump being Trump. But you've served in the military of this country, something that is at the hands and operates at the whims, in some cases, it seems, of the President of the United States. So the implications of this from a national security perspective are serious.
You know, when you raise your right hand and agree to serve in the United States military, you are putting yourself in a chain of command that goes all the way up to the president. And the president makes decisions that are life and death. They're life and death for every American, but especially for those in uniform. And when you think about the crises of instability that are happening around the world, instability in the Oval Office, let alone in the president himself, is literally life-threatening to our troops. And another thing, you know, when I served in the military, I did so believing that the flag that was on my shoulder and that I saluted at daybreak was a flag that symbolizes our responsibility to protect things like free speech and the idea that nobody is above the law. And I think when a whistleblower blows the whistle on official misconduct, that is an act of loyalty to the republic for which it stands. Patriotism requires us, and so does the law, to honor it as such.
Your fellow Democrats on the Hill, while they're talking impeachment inquiry, we heard from Nancy Pelosi earlier today, also talking drug prices, USMCA, and let's talk gun legislation. You are in Las Vegas talking gun safety. You recently said this could be a golden moment in gun safety, gun legislation. Do you think we're going to get something done? There is a lot of focus on impeachment. What is your message to Mitch McConnell, to President Trump? Because it sits in their hands. Congress has already passed, and that is in the House of Democrats. Now it's in their hands.
That's right. This was already passed in the House. Background checks, common sense gun law that the vast majority of the American people support, including, by the way, Republicans and gun owners. So the simple question to Mitch McConnell and to the president is, why are you defying the American people and refusing to give us the measures we are asking for overwhelmingly in order to keep our children, our schools, our places of worship, our shopping centers, and our neighborhoods safe? You have a chance to save thousands of lives. Why won't you do it?
Mayor, I want to get your take on the New York Times report on the president discussing the border in March, throwing out the idea of putting snakes or alligators in a border trench with spikes on top of a wall. It also says, quote, after publicly suggesting that soldiers shoot immigrants if they threw rocks, the president backed off when his staff told him that was illegal. But later in a meeting, aides recalled, he suggested that they shoot migrants in the legs to slow them down. That's not allowed either, they told him. Mayor, this puts into stark relief the degree to which the president takes this issue to heart as a campaign promise. What do you make of this, if true?
I mean, to call it childlike is an insult to children. And it also reflects the basic mentality of this president, which is he doesn't regard human beings as human beings. We can absolutely manage our border in a way that is consistent with our laws and with our values. But alligator-filled moats, spikes, this kind of nonsense obviously does not make America safer, and it raises profound questions about the fitness of this president to serve. That being said, I think we've had profound questions about this president's fitness all along. So the best thing that I can do about it as a candidate for president is to make the case for a better way, for the kind of country we will want to live in after this presidency comes to an end one way or the other.
Mayor Pete, take us to the U.S. economy. Republicans think it's one of the president's strongest winning arguments, but we got some pretty dark numbers from the manufacturing index this week. How do you see things?
Well, this is really urgent for the part of country I live in, the industrial Midwest. It appears now that the manufacturing sector is officially entering a recession. And you can see it when you talk to workers and different folks who are impacted by this trade war that has really done nothing for the American worker. Obviously, it's harmed American farmers. It's harming American consumers as our prices go up. And that's going to have consequences for the economy. There's also a bigger question, which is how well is this economy working for us? When I'm president, I plan to ensure that we stop measuring the wrong things. And the number one measure that I would look to let us know if the economy was doing well would be the income growth of the 90%. Right now, even when the numbers on a page look good, more and more Americans are fighting just to hold on to what we've got. Because if incomes are growing, it's not as fast as the cost of prescription drugs and saving for retirement, housing, and education. And that's when the numbers on a page are looking good. Now that we're starting to see a downturn coming out of the manufacturing sector, it just demonstrates how out of touch the president is and how destructive his policies have been. He's managed to hang on, tack on an extra couple years to the Obama recovery, and that might be good news, but now we're in a very precarious position as an economy and as a country, especially in places like the industrial Midwest.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.